Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Help My Business is Growing, a podcast where we explore how to grow and build a business that is healthy and sustainable. I'm your host, Kathy Svatina, a fractional CFO and a founder of Newcastle Finance, a company where we believe that everything that you do in your business will eventually end up in your finances. And to get to healthy finances is to have a healthy business. Well, how do you get there? This is where this podcast comes in to help. When growing a service-based business, protecting your IP or intellectual property can sometimes take a backseat to everything else that's happening in the business. And this could lead to a very costly problem down the road. Actually, multiple costly problems, especially if you crafted products and services that can expand your business. Your competition can easily snatch them up for themselves and you lose potential revenue. Then there's also the growing influence of AI and automation, which can unintentionally replicate and spread your offerings. So the line between innovation and imitation is more blurred than ever. And protecting your creations at this moment is vital, absolutely vital. So, we're going to be talking about intellectual property in this episode. First, we're going to talk about what is IP or intellectual property exactly. Then, how do you go about protecting what you own? And what exactly can you copyright, license, or trademark? And what are the differences between those three? And how can you maximize your intellectual assets to supercharge your business growth? As a quick reminder, all of the episodes on this podcast, including this one, come with timestamps for topics that we discuss, and each one has its own blog post. So if you're interested in reading versus listening, go ahead and click on the links there in the show notes. My guest today is Erin Austin. She is a strategic lawyer and consultant who uses her 25 years of practicing law, including roles as a CEO and general counsel, at a large and small IP-driven companies such as Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, MGM, to help female founders of expertise-based firms build and protect saleable assets so that the business is ready to sell when the founder is ready to exit. She is a graduate of Harvard Law School, and her experience as a lawyer and as an executive at the intersection of business and the law informs the elevated legal and strategic business advice she provides to her clients. Erin is passionate about using her expertise to create an economy that works for everyone. Through her Hourly to Exit podcast and her consulting practice, Think Beyond IP, Erin guides women on transforming their businesses from an unscalable income generator into a saleable wealth building asset. Her special talent is helping women meet their growth goals by creating IP-based revenue streams. In her spare time, Erin likes to clear brush on her farmette, search for the perfect gluten-free baguette, all these are appreciated, and work on her backhand. Join us. Erin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm super excited because this is selfishly a topic that I am exploring right now. So it's very relevant for me. But, it's also relevant for other growing businesses because when businesses are growing, there's obviously a lot of plates that they need to juggle in the air. And one thing that they might forget about is protecting intellectual property. And if you're not doing that, it can cost a lot of money to forget that aspect of business. And we're going to be talking about intellectual property, specifically intellectual property in service-based businesses. So, Erin, let's first talk about this. What actually falls under the umbrella of intellectual property?
Yeah, so in the US, and by the way, we'll be talking about US law here only, although it does apply to many other places around the world, but I am in the US and I work with US intellectual property laws. So in the US, we have four basic categories of intellectual property: copyright, trademarks, trade secrets, and patents. And I've already told Kathy not to ask me anything about patents, but for our audience, the copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets are going to be the most relevant. So copyrights, they protect the expression of your ideas. So when something has been put in tangible form means any way that somebody else could perceive it other than like listening to it, firsthand or seeing it firsthand, but in a way that it could be copied. So on paper, in a notebook, on canvas, on film, in a
Mhm.
computer. When something is put down in expressive form and it's original and it has some degree of creativity, it is copyrightable under US copyright law. And that gives the bundle of rights that you get under your copyrights, or the right to the exclusive right to make copies of it, to sell copies of it, distribute it, to perform it publicly, like to perform a song, to display it like artwork, to create derivatives, like such as turning your book into a movie. And so these are exclusive rights that you get
Mhm.
as the owner of a copyright. And so in our businesses, that would be our podcast episodes, our blog posts, the books that we write, the courses that we create, our workshop materials. So those are all elements that would be eligible for copyright protection, assuming they're original and we wrote them. So then we have trademarks. And so trademarks give you exclusive ownership of the source of your goods or services. So a trademark tells the consumer, it really is about protecting the consumer as much as it is about you, so that the consumer isn't confused about the source of a good or service. So nobody else can use McDonald's trademarks, because if somebody sees the golden arches, they know exactly what the source of those goods are. If somebody sees the FedEx
Yep.
trademark, they know exactly who's providing that service. And so that does not protect your expression. It protects the origin of your good or service to make sure that nobody else can confuse the marketplace by using your trademark. And then trade secrets are interesting in that, many of us probably use non-disclosure agreements or been asked to use non-disclosure agreements to help protect confidential information. And
Mhm.
so trade secrets are kind of like confidential information, like on steroids. And so in order to get the intellectual property law protection for your trade secrets, they have to not just be protected with NDAs, but you also have to have lots of other types of protections, like you keep it under lock and key, or you disclose it only on an as needed basis, or you have some sort of key in order to figure out what it is. And so you also need to, have what you do to protect that has to be consistent with the value of that trade secret. So if I'm Coca-Cola and my trade secret's worth, I don't know, how many $1 billion is Coca-Cola's trade secret worth? What you will spend on protecting that and keeping it secret is different than what I'm going to spend to keep, my financial secret, which absolutely nobody wants. So those are the main three buckets. Patents is the one where you have something that is something useful, an invention that is useful and not obvious. You can get protection for those patented ideas so that nobody else can steal them from you. So those are the four buckets.
So if we return back to the copyrights, which you originally talked about, do you have to apply for a copyright or is that given to you by default when you create something? How does that work?
Yeah, so copyrights vest in the creator of, they call it an author under the law, because originally it was about people writing stuff, it wasn't about people coding. So it vested in the
Mhm.
author of at the time of creation. So the moment I speak into this microphone and it is recorded, that material is copyrightable at that moment. So whoever owns this podcast, in this case it's you, that copyright attaches at the moment of creation. And so when I write my newsletter into my computer, that copyright attaches at the moment of creation. If I take a photograph, the copyright attaches at the moment of creation. The registration process comes into place because there are additional remedies that you have in the event somebody infringes your copyright. So if somebody steals that photograph and tries to pass it off as their own, it has to be registered for me to be able to sue them and get damages from them. And so that is why we take the extra step of registration. And what we choose to register really depends on the value of that individual work. I write every single day and I do not register everything for copyright protection. In fact, I don't register, frankly, my podcast episodes or my newsletter pieces. I would only register those things that this is personally, those things that I would directly derive revenue from. So courses and books and things like that. Things that you're going to share with third parties that could also help them derive revenue. Those are the types of things that I strongly encourage people to actually register.
And how enforceable is it? So I see this a lot, and I actually use that in my content as well. So usually I do a C copyright, Newcastle Finance 2020, whatever, 3, 4, whatever the year is. How enforceable is that? And is that a good practice, or is that just kind of redundant? I mean, how useful is that to begin with?
Yeah, it is useful at the end of the day, especially with how much stuff is online, just to put people on notice that they scroll down at the bottom of your website or on your graphic or on your podcast site and they see that copyright notice. And so that puts them on notice that there is someone who claims copyright ownership in this work. And if you don't have that does not mean that you lose your copyright protection. You have it at the moment it's created, whether you publish it, whether you write the great American novel and you stick it in your drawer and it never sees the light of day, you still have the copyright protection on that. But putting the world on notice that you're claiming copyright protection is helpful. And frankly, if somebody wants to contact you like, oh, I really like this and I want to use it in my book or in my workshop, then they can see who to contact. So it's helpful in that way as well. And as far as it being enforceable, again, if you have somebody steals content from your website, you notice it, you send them a cease and desist letter, and most people will just take it down, right? And so in that way, you've put them on notice. Hey, that's mine. I see you. Take it down.
Yeah.
And if you take it down, then this doesn't go any further. Let's say they, go, ha ha ha, I'm keeping it because I'm selling tons of stuff. I'm not taking it down. And you need to
Mhm.
then enforce it. So enforcement, that means suing them. And so, yes, if you have a registration and you can show that means you have to prove that they copied it and that they've infringed one of your rights, copying, distribution, performance, and they've infringed one of your rights, then yes, you can enforce that.
So, this actually, I think of AI at this point, right? So, AI is not really creating new things, but what if someone copies the content that you have? Let's say they copy the website and they put it into the AI, and the AI actually just rephrases it a little bit, so, meaning that the content is a little bit different, but is not exactly a word for word type of copying, someone directly copying and pasting. Does that still fall under the copyright law or no? How does that work?
Yeah, it can. And by the way, I didn't preface this, but of course, this is information like your specific circumstances. You should talk to a lawyer about them. But generally, so AI, what copyright protects is copying your original expression. So, can something be changed enough that it's not exactly your expression? It's your idea, but not your expression? Probably they can get away with that. If it's like, let's say your expression is creating a new world that is so original and so creative that there's no other way for them to have created a similar world without having used your work. So
Mhm.
what they've done is created a derivative of your work. And when you have a copyright, you have the exclusive right to create derivatives. So the question is, have they created a derivative of it, or have they just used the ideas and created their own? And that would be kind of what you're fighting about.
So, are derivatives then, if they created derivatives from your original body of work that was copyrighted, is that still eligible for a cease and desist letter and under, or no?
Yes. So one of the buckets of rights that you have is when you have a copyright protection is the exclusive right to create derivatives or to authorize other people to create derivatives. So I can't take someone else's book and create a sequel from it. I can't take someone's book and create a movie from it. I can't take someone's book and create a workshop with it. So that would be creating a derivative of their work. And if they do that, if I do that without permission, then I am infringing their copyright, and they would have a right to ask me to stop doing it. Or if I don't stop doing it, or if I've already hurt them, let's say I've sold, the motion picture
Yeah.
rights, that to come after me for damages.
And I'd like to talk a little bit more about AI because I see this all the time. People creating content with AI, and it's really challenging because who actually owns that copyright? It is a because it's not you that's creating it, it's AI creating it. What is your thought on it? Are there any legal guidance about this yet?
Yeah, it's still, as you can imagine, changing daily.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with the Copyright Office a couple of weeks ago about this, and the answer was it depends. And so basically, the current AI, and this is, I think, what most of us have access to, like the chat GBTs of the world, they have a reservoir of information that's been fed to them, right? And then we ask it a question, it mines its reservoir of information and comes out with an answer. And they do not guarantee that they haven't just lifted something completely. And so you don't know whether or not it is infringing. But let's just say it isn't. Let's just say they've grabbed information from all over their database and they've come out with what is generally, frankly, pretty bland output.
Yeah.
And you take that. And so let's say they take that and they write an entire blog post with it. And you say, this is great. I don't need to do anything with it. And you just post it on your site. That is not copyrightable. Copyright only applies to things that are from human, it requires human intervention. So machines are still not human, I think. So that would not be eligible for copyright protection. And so if you were to try to register that in the Copyright Office and you honestly said that it was from AI, they would kick that back and say that's not copyrightable. Just like if you have an elephant paint a painting, even though no matter how beautiful and creative we may think it is, it's not copyrightable because it was not created by a human. Now, let's say you ask AI to create an outline for you, and they create this outline, and then you take that outline and then you use your own intellect, your human intellect, to flesh it out
Mhm.
and write the article from that outline. That would most likely be copyrightable because that then has your human intervention that has put the layer of creativity and originality on top of the AI generated materials. And so how the Copyright Office is parsing this, that I don't know. I mean, they'll tell you that they won't copyright the first, but they will the second. But how they know that I don't know, like without someone disclosing it on their own. Although I do know that there are programs that can kind of look at it, some output and determine whether or not it was AI generated. I know obviously colleges and things are using these, and maybe they're using something like that. I don't know. But I mean, that would be a lot because there's an awful lot of volume there. But that's kind of that's where they are today. And that could change.
Yeah, it seems like it's an ever evolving field. I mean, the way how we've ChatGPT exploded last year. I believe it was like October and November, and we're recording this in 2023, and it exploded in 2022. And already things are completely different than were 6, 7, 8 months ago. So it feels like the law hasn't really caught up to it yet, and it might hopefully in the future because it seems it's a little bit fuzzy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is copyright registration. The application is mostly self-reported. So if one does ask you to certify that everything that you state in the application is true, and you do certify that this is my original material, I'm the one who created it. And so if you are being truthful, then on its face, if they see the material and it looks like it's not just a list of names, that it is an original and creative work, then it will generally be registerable or copyrightable, I should say. But what you do if you're going to lie about it, that's the big issue with all AI generated stuff, whether it's for school or for work or for registration. That's the big issue. Oh, and while we're here, before I forget, is that one of the issues that you will find, I mean, if you are using a third party to create something and deliver something to you, like, let's say
Mhm.
you hire a copywriter to create a post for you. Do you want to have some restrictions in there about their ability to use ChatGPT. On the one hand, like if you're happy with how it reads, then you're happy with how it reads. Or is it really important to you that it's something that they, use their kind of own creativity for? Or if it was assisted some, but not all the way. I mean, these are just things to consider.
Yeah, that's a good guidance, especially when you're using like a marketing agency. And I know that a lot of marketing agencies now are actually using AI to generate content for the clients. We've even had a couple of people on this podcast talking about it. How do you do that? And how do you actually make sure that they're doing a good work doing it if they're using it versus just charging you a tremendous amount of money for chat GPT type of stuff? So yeah, there's a lot of things to think about there. But let's talk about trademarks now. So we've talked about copyrights and let's talk about trademarks. I know that trademarks have two distinctions. That could be TM or R, restricted. What is the difference between those two? And is one better than the other?
Yes, one is better than the other. Basically, like copyrights, you can have a trademark without registering it. So we have what we call common law trademarks. So let's say, I mean, my business is called Think Beyond IP. It just is not a registered trademark, but I can claim common law protection of it. I can say, like, I use this name and I am creating a reputation, a positioning in the marketplace with this name. And I have the URL and I publish with it and I appear with it. And so I could use the TM where I'm claiming common law trademark protection for this trademark. And that's really only good on a state level. So someone, across the street from me couldn't say their Think Beyond IP, but it does nothing for me on a national level. When I register the trademark with the US Trademark and Patent Office, that is under federal intellectual property laws, I can get a federal trademark registration. And if I go through that process, there's an application process, an application fee. It's generally something that you would use a trademark lawyer for to help search to make sure that there's no conflicting trademarks. And they may be conflicting, common law trademarks as well. And then if you go through that process, it goes to the trademark office. They will do their own analysis to see if there's any other confusing marks, any other registered marks that your mark could be confusing with. And if they say, okay, there's no confusion here, and they give you the registration, then you can use the R. So the R means that you've gone through the federal trademark registration process, vetted by the trademark office, and you have a registered trademark, then you put it in the R with a circle. But you can use the TM at any time you claim kind of this is my trademark, including while you're waiting to hear back from the trademark office.
So in the journey when you're turning your expertise into intellectual property, whether you're using copyrights or trademarks or trade secrets, if someone is on this journey and have no idea where to start, like they should even use this or not, is it worth it to do it? Because it's not just, it's a timely process. For trademarks, I believe it could take anywhere from 6 to 18 months, correct?
Correct.
And if you're using lawyers, it can be expensive. So how do you go through that criteria, whether it's worth it to you to even do that or not?
Well, there's a couple of things, which is, from my perspective, that the order of value in most service-based businesses, professional services businesses, and so where our clients are other businesses and we're not selling to consumers, is the value is in our expertise. And by that, I mean how we provide value to our clients. What are we selling to our clients? What are our clients paying us for, right? And that is the thing that we want to protect. And that we protect with copyrights. You don't protect that with trademarks. Trademarks protects so that when someone mentions your name, they know you from somebody else. That trademark does not provide value to the client. The client actually doesn't really care about your trademark. The client cares about the transformation that you provide to them, the value that they get from you, and they get that value from the work you do for them, the deliverables you provide for them, the transformation that you provide for them. And those things are the things that are protected with copyrights. Those are your workshops. Those are your trainings. Those are the frameworks that you use to provide the service. And so protecting those things to me is always going to be the first thing. And it's not always about registration. Again, when we are creating something, as soon as we create it, if it's original, we are creating something that is copyrightable. And so we have the copyright protection, assuming that we are putting it in tangible form and it's original. And so I encourage anyone who's developing their expertise-based business is like to think about, maybe you come out of corporate, you start your own consultancy, and as you move through and are developing your expertise, you start to notice some commonalities among your clients. Maybe you have a specific niche that you're working with. Maybe there's a specific type of problem that you're working with. And so if I were to take the example of, say, an HR consultant, maybe at the beginning, you're helping everyone with any kind of HR issue you may have. And maybe you have some certification. So you have materials that you've received from your certification programs and things. But as you continue to develop your niche and your expertise, you will find things that are original to you. You have your own ideas about this is a better way to do it. You have original ideas about these are the things that my clients that are unique to my clients. And you're starting to create original materials based on your own experiences with your clients. And as we create those things by creating materials that are protectable under copyright law, we're writing them down, we're putting them in the form of written materials, in workbooks, in courses. We're creating things that we can protect and that we can prevent other people from copying and distributing without us. We are creating processes that are documented in a way that we can more effectively deliver our services. If we have employees, then of course we need to have systems and processes so that they can effectively serve the clients as well. And if we are using subcontractors, of course, we want to also make sure that we have our intellectual property protected so that they can't use it without us. And even with our clients, not our clients are good people, but if we haven't protected our intellectual property through the use of contracts, then they can take your training and use it, without you. And that is the way that we sometimes lose control of our intellectual property, is when we aren't using agreements appropriately to make sure that we are controlling our intellectual property, controlling the reuse of it, whether or not someone else can make derivatives from it, whether or not someone can use it without you. These are all things that we have the benefit of when we have intellectual property rights and we're using our contracts in connection with that.
One of the things that I like to do on this podcast is I like to have stories, what I call stories from the battlefield, from people that have been through the process with you. And how did their business come out at the end? So do you have a story like that where a business owner came to you, like a service provider came to you, that weren't really sure whether they should do it or not? And what did they end up selecting to trademark? And how did that even transform their business? Do you have any example of that?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I am not a trademark lawyer, so I'm a copyright lawyer. So I work with the copyright and so protecting your expertise through the use of copyrights and through the use of contracts. People who do trademarks, generally they have a logo or business name that they want to protect. And a trademark lawyer will tell you that if there is a name or a logo that would just crush you if you lost it,
Mhm.
then go ahead and make the investment in it and do that. But at the end of the day, again, when we're talking about businesses where you have corporate clients, if for some reason you lost your trademark, like, I mean, I had this one. It was called the Contract Whisperer. And I used to, I'm like, someday I'm going to trademark that. Someday I'm going to trademark it. I never did. And then somebody else did. And then I'm like, oh, but there will always be another name. Like, because it's all about, it starts with the value and
Mhm.
then you attach the name to the value. It doesn't go the other way. You don't create the value with the name. You create the value and then you stick a name on it. And it really doesn't matter, frankly, what name you stick on it. But once you do stick the name on it, then you want to make sure they're connected. So I don't have a story about trademarks, but regarding protecting your intellectual property so that you can use it to create new revenue streams. That's kind of my favorite way to work with service-based businesses, taking them from a maybe an hour, even hourly based revenue stream, one where their income is attached to their time that they're spent, to using their intellectual property to create revenue streams that are more profitable, either because it's more efficient to deliver that service or it's something that can be delivered without them. So they can get revenue from their expertise without them actually showing up. And so I have a client who she does social skills teaching for neurodivergent kids. And she did that in person, one on one with kids in her location. And she wanted to be able to allow other people to also provide the same social skills training to kids in other locations. And so we created the intellectual property around that and created a package around that so she could create a licensing program so that other people could also deliver her expertise, which is in the form of the curriculum that she has. And so for that, she receives a license fee. So she gets revenue from her expertise without actually having to be there. So that is my favorite way to work with people.
Wow, that's amazing. So, how does licensing work in the intellectual property? Because right now we've talked about a lot copyrights, trademarks, and we've talked about trade secrets too. But where does licensing fall under that umbrella, or is that completely different side of intellectual property?
Yeah, no, what it is licensing is literally giving permission to a third party to use your intellectual property, whether it is copyrightable material, like giving a license for someone to deliver your workshop. So I've got a workshop and I'm delivering it one on one, but I have a colleague, like, I'd love to use your workshop with my clients too. And so I license my workshop materials, which I first register with the Copyright Office. And then I license to my colleague my workshop materials, and now she can go and deliver them. And in exchange, I receive a license fee. It also applies to trademarks. So, famously, franchises are trademark licenses. So, I buy a McDonald's franchise, I get a license to use their trademark and their trade dress and all their processes. So, that is a trademark license. And trade secret license would be, let's say I develop a new Coca-Cola formula and I license it to Coca-Cola, And so I keep it secret. I protect it as a trade secret, but I license it just solely to the person who's going to actually take that thing to market. So, and that would apply on patents, obviously, on patents as well. Someone creates a pharmaceutical or some kind of machinery, they have a patent for it, and then they license it to the manufacturer and distributor. So the license is the legal document, because it is a legal document that we use to give permission to a third party to use some or all of our intellectual property. If we look at a publishing agreement, that's actually a license. So I am an author, I write my book, and my publishing agreement is a license to the publishing company. So I retain the copyright. I don't give you ownership, I still own it. But you, the publishing company, I give you a license to make copies and distribute it. I might give you the license to create derivatives in the form of translations into other languages. I might give you a license to sell the motion picture rights to it. Or I might retain the rights for the motion picture and I separately license the rights to create a motion picture directly to the movie studio. So you can break up pieces of your copyrights as well. They don't all have to go to the same person. They can go for 1 year, they can go for as long as the copyright exists.
And for the service-based businesses that you work with and the ones that have licensing in place, is there a particular way how they license that is the most common? So the way how I envision this is the licensing can either be ongoing, so you pay like a monthly fee or yearly fee or something like that, or is it just like a one-time fee and then it goes and stays in place for a particular amount of time? And then you have to license it. How does that relationship work?
Yeah, and it would depend on the nature of the work that's being licensed, but there's a number of ways to structure license fee and license terms. So it could be, if I am that pharmaceutical company, and I'm going to put gazillion dollars in R&D to create and bring your thing to market, that's going to be the life of the material kind of license. First is, if I'm going to give you a right to use my workshop, that's probably going to be an annual license. It could be a one-time fee. It could be a monthly fee, or it could be, a person fee. I personally like by length time, because when you have a person fee or workshop fee, something like that, then as a licensor, you almost have to audit your licensees to make sure you're actually getting paid what you should be getting paid. And then you have less, one of the beauties of a licensing program is it helps you kind of predict your income, because I know that at the first of every month, I'm going to get this license fee from someone, regardless of how often they deliver my workshop. So it's on them to make sure they're delivering the workshop enough for it to be profitable, versus someone who only has to pay me if they deliver the workshop. And so does that make as much sense to me? Then do I have to chase them afterwards to make sure I get paid for the workshops that they delivered? So I prefer by buckets of time, by time periods, but there are a number of ways you can structure it any way that you want to, or even be a percentage of revenue as well.
So Erin, we've talked a lot there's a lot of stuff that we covered. And if someone is looking into, it's a service-based business or a business that it's looking into do a copyright, trademark, and potentially even might license all of this, what is the next step that they can do in the next week or two? Because there's a lot of moving pieces, moving parts. I mean, what is the next step that they can do to get them closer to where they really want to be in making sure that the business intellectual property is protected?
Well, I want them to start thinking about what they have in their business that is original to them, and that they're starting to document that. I like to, think of it as an inventory of what we have that we work with every day. Sometimes it's just in our heads. And, as a lawyer, having reviewed, I don't know how many master services agreements in my career, like a lot of that review process resides in my head until I finally kind of put it down in a standards and procedures process. Start to document things, like how do you do things, any original materials that you want to put together, and start creating an inventory of ways that you provide value to your clients, so you can start creating assets that you may be able to sell someday. By that sell, I mean as, say as a template or as a course or a book. And then you're creating systems so that you can become more efficient, and so that you can use less expensive resources such as subcontractors to help you deliver those services, and protecting them either through registration, if it is something that's copyrightable, or through the use of contracts. When you're using your subcontractors, make sure you have agreements so that anything they deliver to you, you own, and that it's clear that the things that you have shared with them, they're not going to reuse without you. Make sure that when you're signing those client agreements, that you have restrictions in there about how they can reuse the materials that you deliver to them. And then, so just building an inventory of intellectual property so that as it grows, you will have a body of work that you can pull from to create, those leveraged revenue streams that are independent from your time.
Awesome, Erin. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
I am at Think Beyond IP. And also from there, you can sign up for my newsletter. But I also have a podcast called Hourly to Exit, and LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah, and I highly recommend listening to Erin's podcast, because it really is very insightful, even if you're not an hourly business, because there's a lot of good stuff out there that we just talked about, good ideas, how you can make your business into a scalable income generator, as you like to say, Erin. Thanks so much for being on the show, Erin.
Thank you for having me.